Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. It's time for another installment of your favorite YouTube channel. We are going to talk about your second rough draft, which is due this week. Originally, I had asked that you submit it by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday evening. But I am, in my infinite wisdom, I've decided to extend that another 24 hours and give you all until Wednesday, April 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to submit that second rough draft. Okay, this is going to be the draft that I give you feedback on. You've done research questions. I gave you feedback on those. You revised them, then you did some secondary research, wrote your annotated bibliographies. I gave you feedback on those. You had a first rough draft due last week, and hopefully most of you have gotten in touch with your peer review partner and been able to get and give some feedback. So here are the requirements for what I want for this second rough draft. Okay, this is where we sort of put it all together. This is where your ideas are really starting to refine and really take shape. And I've broken it down for you into sort of three major sections, I guess. So as we talked about last week, an introduction. Hopefully you crafted one already for your first rough draft, and now you can refine that and revise it a little bit. You know, if you're struggling, just use John Swale's method, creating a research space. I've talked about it a few times now. It's on my courses. If that's a little hard for you to parse, just think about it in these terms, right? What is the exigence that you're responding to? What is some necessary background information that your audience needs to get up to speed? And then what are your aims as an author? What are you accomplishing or trying to accomplish in conducting this particular research project? So that's your introduction. Now it comes to a discussion and synthesis of all of your sources. This draft needs to discuss, at the very minimum, 3 scholarly sources, 1 class text, something that we read or watched and talked about as a class this semester. Okay, that goes for anything in the article archive, any video that we watched, any text that we consumed and discussed, James G., Amsel Dua, all that stuff. Okay, so that's 4 written, or this could be, like I said, it could be a TED Talk. This final source is your primary data. Many of you have conducted surveys, some of you have conducted interviews, a couple of you are doing what we call sort of data analysis. But if you're struggling on how to write about, integrate, and analyze your primary data, do yourself a favor and go back through the last few pages of Dana Lynn Driscoll's article on Introduction to Primary Research Methods. The very last section is called Analyzing and Writing About Primary Research, and that starts on page 168 and goes until the end of the article. So peruse that again. It'll give you a lot of good tips and sort of ways to organize your thoughts. At the end of the day, the way that you write about primary data is pretty simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. The goal is to take the data or the information that you have collected and try to tell some sort of story with it. Meaning, after you have looked at all of the answers to your survey questions or your interview questions or whatever, what sort of narrative is it telling you about your subject of inquiry? And how can you tell that story using the data to support the narrative that you construct? That's basically the goal, right? And ultimately, as you discuss your primary data, you should be pointing back to your scholarly sources or the class text that you have chosen to integrate and say, hey, this part of my data speaks back to the first source that I quoted because, or this data contradicts a claim that an earlier study was, conducted study earlier, and they made a claim, and my data now is showing that people feel differently about that subject, or something like that. The point is to use this as new knowledge and put it into conversation with existing knowledge. And then your conclusion, you wrap it all up. It's all about the so what and the now what, okay? The so what means a couple of things. The whole kit and caboodle. What have we talked about this semester? Adding to the academic conversation. not ending it by saying I'm right, I'm making an argument, and everybody else is wrong. It is how do you push the ball forward, okay? So what new knowledge have you offered to this dialogue? Why do you think it's important? How have you pushed this conversation further or in new directions? And ultimately, now what? Where do we go from here? And I put we in scare quotes because we just means sort of academia or scholars or researchers. If someone else were to sort of take the torch, so to speak, and pick up where you left off, what sort of questions do they need to ask now? Okay, what sort of questions were you unable to answer, and why? That's what good research does. Is it sort of pushes it forward and takes us in new directions and asks new questions. And again, it's not about finding the answers. It's about exploring the possibilities. Okay. One other thing. I am very close to being done on uploading your critical synthesis grades. You guys should all see those in the next 24 hours if you haven't seen them already. Very happy with what I'm seeing there, and what I've seen so far in the annotated bibliographies and the rough drafts, I'm pretty happy too. So keep up the good work, guys. We're almost there. You're almost done. You're doing so well. I'll come back next Sunday and we'll talk about the final draft of this, which will be due May 3rd, and then your short sort of reflective essay, which is your final project, or I guess you could consider it your final exam. All right. Sorry for the diatribe, but I wanted to get all of that in there. If you need anything, let me know. Email me. Again, office hours on Wednesday, 3 to 5. Peace.